spoilers. Not like full spoilers. Like we're spoiling it all.
Hello and welcome to Game Informer Spoiled. I'm Joe Juba. I'm joined by Alex Stadnik.
Hello, friends.
And Matt Miller.
Howdy there.
And we are going to be talking about Ghost of Tsushima. And when I say talking about, I mean we are going to be spoiling it. We're talking about the story stuff, the ending, the ally quests along the way. So if you have not finished the game and you would like to preserve some of that experience for yourself, you should watch this video later. Don't watch it now, bookmark it, come back. But for those of you who have finished and who want to hear us unpack the story and various other things about Ghost of Tsushima, we are going to dig into that. We're going to dig into that right now.
Right now.
So
right get out of here.
Get out of here, all you people who haven't finished this great game.
Yeah.
But I think a good place to start, even though there's a lot of very specific stuff that we can get into, a good place to start would just be overall sort of impressions of the story. Zoomed out, big picture. Alex, what did you think of this?
Man.
Because you just finished,
like,
right?
Literally last night at 1 a.m., I finished the game and then I wrapped up Ishikawa's storyline and Lady Masako's storyline. And I felt just I think it's my overall opinion on the game too. I just felt that there were some really satisfying beats in this, and I have an issue with some of the pacing in the third act that we can talk about later, but I felt like all the beats that I wanted them to hit on, and I thought there was a solid conclusion to everything that they had kind of built up into that point, especially at the end. Getting into spoilers right away, I was shocked at how quickly the battle with the Khan was. Like it felt like we were in it. It was happening. We killed him and it was done. And I was like, okay, that went a little quick for me. But then when it zooms out and you're meeting with Lord Shimura, and it's the kind of that realization of like, oh, this story, as much as it was about defeating the Khan, was always about Jin and Lord Shimura's relationship. And I was like, okay, that makes sense now. I feel more with it. I really enjoyed that aspect of it and looking back on it through that lens.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting on something really important there, Alex, which is that like that pacing, independent of any pacing concerns that somebody could have about the bulk of the game, I really appreciated the way that they put together that game ending. And if you think about the way they could have done it and really extended out all that stuff with the Khan and made it more, like have more phases to that battle or something like that, it almost would have been more making the stuff with Shimura feel like an afterthought, and instead it makes it feel like, okay, we've resolved this thing that is the threat, but now let's return in the final sort of epilogue stuff to dealing with the real thrust of what's happening in this story. And the way they wrapped that up for me, I thought was pitch perfect. Like it totally nailed everything that they built up to that point, up to and including, the haiku stuff at the end. I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the choice at the end, I thought like really spoke to everything that they had built up to that point.
Yeah. So what choice of the two options, what one did you guys go with? Did you spare him or kill him?
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
No. Yeah.
So I spared him. And I
wait. So hold on. Did you see that as you? Because like when I got to that moment, I read that as a very like almost a vindictive move
to spare
him. That was not mercy.
Interesting.
Because it's like,
you see,
right?
That's actually what I think is really interesting about that choice is that I think most people up to that point, you play Jin. I mean, Jin's not a character that you're playing as a bad guy, right? There's no point during the story that in order to embody that character, you're being a jerk, right? You're always kind of trying to do right. And so the follow through of what that choice isn't for me about what is like there was one fundamental choice that was good and one that was evil. It was more like, which of these things do you think Jin considers to be the good path. Because I also spared him.
Yeah.
And I was really satisfied.
Whoa.
I was really satisfied with the way that pans out, because I was worried when I spared him that the subsequent dialogue was going to be him like talking down to Lord Chimera, or like telling him like, you don't even deserve a warrior's death or whatever. And I was really happy that they don't do that. Because
what happens? Fill me in.
So they basically, I wish I could remember the exact line. Alex, maybe you remember it, but there's something along the lines of the idea of like, I don't, by your own description of me, I don't have any honor.
Correct.
And
yeah.
so
and
I don't. And what does he say?
He said I'm refused to kill my family, basically.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I came from with my choice on that, is like,
totally
by Jin's own volition, he does not have the standard of honor that the shogun and the samurai respect. So, and I think he values, as he showed, becoming the ghost and living his life as the ghost, he doesn't value those honors the same, or those traits,
conceptions of honor.
Yeah, in the same way. And I think he values, he talks about it with Yuna a ton. He's like, he's my only family. Like, this is all I have in this world. And to me, I thought I made that choice in Jin's shoes, thinking that he would have done it because he sees a path that is maybe more morally, gels with his morals more. And like, I think he envisions a world where he and Chimera could still have that father-son relationship. So that's why I spared him.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, my thought process going into this was that if the world existed, like leading up to that fight, I think I would have agreed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if a world existed in which reconciliation between those two was possible, it would have happened there. Like, I don't think I think at the point that like Lord Chimera is willing to draw his sword and kill who is essentially his son, I think at that point, like the divide between them felt just too great going forward. Yeah. So then I saw the act of like kindness and mercy and the act of reconciliation of through my path to be killing him, to sort of say like, we're on different paths, but I respect you and your choices enough to like give you what you want in this situation. Because I think, my line of thought was that like for Lord Chimera to sort of live past that moment, to sort of live with his failure there, would be more of a punishment than the death he actually wanted.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. And maybe he deserves a little bit of that punishment for living, for how he handled it, for sending his thousands into battle, kind of knowing that they may be in trouble. So, but that's a really good point. I also got like, I guess do we want to save like what we think of the future for later, or do we just want to go?
No, let's talk about everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you guys have more. We can sort of keep it organized in the sense of like we're talking about the sort of conclusion and the final boss and all that stuff. I mean, if you guys have anything else you wanted to throw in there, but I don't mind switching to something else either.
I mean, before we got off that topic, the only thing I would say is that like I felt like the conclusion stayed very true to what had come before. I think you and I, Joe, in both in conversations about games and even talking about movies and television shows and stuff like that, that's often my metric for a good ending, is if the ending amplifies what has come before and makes it seem like everything that has led up to it is all part of a unified experience. And this game had that quality for me, right? Like I got to the end. I really liked the game up to that point. And then the less so the stuff with the Khan, which I think it resolved fine, but more the stuff with Lord Chimera and Jin's choices there and what he does and just those sort of contemplative moments in the final stretch, that gave validity to everything that came before. It made the haiku that I had done previously, wandering around the countryside, it made those feel more meaningful. It made the duels that I'd engaged in up to that point feel like they had been leading someplace, which was to that moment. It made all the conversation about the nature of honor and about the relationship between uncle and nephew and how it echoed father and son. It made all that take on additional meaning and power. And I don't know. I think that was really cool. And I was pleased that the game managed to stay true to its, for lack of a better term, its sort of melancholy nature.
Yeah.
See, I'm sort of two minds on that though, because like I agree. I like the consistency. It felt like it follows through in a way that it's like, you're right. Like this feels like the ending this game was working towards, and I appreciate that. But there's also a part of me that kind of hoping to be surprised at for a story that at every major beat emphasizes loss and in some ways like futility and things like that. Or inevitability also. I think I was kind of hoping that at the end there would sort of be that break in the clouds a little bit. And I'm not even saying necessarily that Lord Shimura and Jin could like live happily ever after as Jito and son and all of that. But I mean, I think we all knew that dream was sort of dashed the second they brought it up, right? When he's like, "You will be my son and formally adopted, and then you will rule this island." I'm like, yeah, that's really I was not confident that was going to happen. But I think I don't know. I think maybe something at the end. I'm not saying that it needs to be happy or uplifting, but I feel like some situation that was a little less just A or B, right? Like
well, you did kill him, Joe.
Yeah, I know. But I don't.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah, I don't know. That's so I'm a little conflicted on that front, I guess.
Sure,
but
for sure,
I get that.
So, did you guys? I guess going back a little bit, how did you guys approach this story? Like, did you mainline main quests and then go do side quests? Did you sort of mix and match as you went? Like, what was the sort of pacing of it like for you?
I'm gonna be honest. If I didn't work at this job and we didn't have, I'd still be playing this game because it was so easy to just, and I caught myself doing it a couple times. It was so easy to just turn on a podcast or some music, like, have the game on and just be doing shrines and looking for fox dens and stuff like that. I thought these are all not necessarily the most original concepts. A lot of open world games have similar things, but they were just executed so well and they were so satisfying and balanced so well for me that I just found myself so easily or like if I had wanted to talk to friends while I was playing, like, doing that kind of stuff. So I think I would have taken more. I think I would have done more of the side stuff if we weren't, building towards this. So I found myself having to remind myself, oh, there's a main story you need to hit. Like you still need to hit those beats and whatnot. And like especially the culminations of Act 1, 2, and 3 were always satisfying. So I was looking forward to those kind of things. But definitely once I had, especially after the conclusion of Act 1, I didn't touch main story for like 5-6 hours after that. I just was exploring and tried to build up the map.
Yeah. I could see that. And one thing, this isn't really spoiler related, but one thing that the game does, I think, so well is make that side content alluring, right? Like I think there are so many games compared to something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, right? That has a huge world with a lot of different activities you can do. But like, let's say you go clear a fortress and your ultimate reward for clearing that fortress is like, hey, here's a purple spear that you don't really use spears and it's not better than your current spear anyway. So, it's like those of questionable rewards. But I think one thing Ghost of Tsushima does really well is everything you're doing feeds into a progression that you're interested in, at least for a while. They don't all go from the beginning of the game to the end, but things like the stances. You pursue some forts, you find some leaders, you earn some stances. You find those hot springs, you get your health up. You find those fox dens and you're like, well, first you're building up charm slots and then you're making good charms even better by continuing, so it's like all of that stuff. I feel like they do a better job than most open world games of making that content that maybe is a little repetitive at least feel like it's feeding toward into something meaningful.
I agree with all that. I mean, I think structurally this game, it's almost something that you don't think about because it's done so well. But it really is the structure of both the UI and how things are presented, how things are categorized, and how you move forward through the game are all handled really well to account for multiple different ways you might try to approach the game. There are players right now who are playing through this game and basically hitting the mainline content and finishing the game. And I mean, I don't even know, would it take maybe 12 to 15 hours, something like that, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like it very ably supports somebody playing it more the way that I did, both because of my personal preference and because I was reviewing it and wanting to really see the bulk of the content, which was I was really engaging with almost everything in each act. And both are fun. I think are fun ways to go through the game, and that's very hard to do. I think there's a lot of open worlds that if you put it to that test, that they would struggle. But here instead you have that kind of golden path through line that's literally golden missions, right? And then you have these ally things that are separated out, and so that you can understand that they kind of take on that higher level of importance because they have those faces attached to them in your UI of like, oh, this is about that guy I like, or that poor grandmother who's dealing with her stuff, and so you can find the ones that you're most interested in and chase them, or if you're interested in all of them, you can know which ones you're taking on, and then splitting it up into the 3-act structure. It very much gives everything a kind of finite approach. So instead of having just, if you think about another way they could have organized stuff is just have that whole game, right? Like all the missions, you could just go through all the allies all the way through their threads and get to the end of their ally thread, and then you go back and you're still in Act 1, right? But instead, they break it up into meaningful chunks so that you finish Act 1, and if you've done all the stuff for your allies, there's actually nothing more to do with them. And so you feel comfortable as a player like myself, because you want to engage with it all. You feel comfortable being like, okay, I think I've checked all the boxes I need to, and I can move forward now.
Yeah,
which I think is great.
Smart. It's so smart when they do stuff like, well, oh, we can't chase Tomoe anymore. She's gone up north. Right. And then you even see on your quest things like, this is Sensei Ishikawa's mission, 3 of 9.
Yeah.
So you know exactly how much is left. It gives you that clear mark of like, you can't do anything more here. So you are safe to continue on with the story as you want. Because like for a player like me, that is, I was just compulsive about clearing all of the story quests from an area. I didn't clear I didn't liberate every single location before I moved on.
Yeah.
But I did every quest in like the first 2 zones. Well, and then in the 3rd zone before like the big final story beats.
Yeah, for sure.
But as I learned in the first act that I carried in through Act 2 and 3 afterwards, is that the game hides some not hides, but it places some pretty important upgrades and things in front of you on that main path that you don't want to miss. So I ended up like, let's say in Act 2, one of your main things is to get that the Sakai armor. But as part of that, on that path, you're also put toward your blowgun and the darts.
Yep.
Which you want those as soon as possible. Well, I did. I love those.
Joe wants those immediately.
Yeah. So what I started doing is playing through the story quests until it got to the point where it's like, it's pretty clear that the next story mission I do is the act ender. And then I just went and cleaned up all of the other story missions methodically around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, Alex, you said you did all of the side or all of the ally missions, except there was one you didn't finish.
I haven't finished Norio's yet, and this is a good segue because I there was a lot of times I think I found myself enjoying the game more when I was focused on the ally stories, because I think they were some of the best pieces of it, especially I loved Ishikawa's was good. I really was taken with Yuna's quick 4 mission arc. And it's because I think they did a really good job of, you know, I towards that part of the game, that we knew she was a thief. You knew she was a thief from the very start, but like that didn't mean a ton to me because she was such a good ally. And it was kind of like the syndrome of like your parents like saying like, oh, I don't trust that kid, he's bad. And I was like, yeah, whatever, he's cool, like, you know. But but like hearing what she did with her brother Taka and like their experience together and how she literally tried to sell him into slavery and like her history with her mom and stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, she really wasn't a good person. And understanding that about her and hitting that redemption arc with her too was important and made me enjoy the character, the depth of the character even more, because there really isn't a ton of good people in this story. I mean, there's some heroic stuff, but like
there's no perfect people in this
correct
story.
Yes,
yeah, I think that's the more important. Yeah, because when you talk about Yuna not being a good person, I don't think it's a question of good people or bad people as much as it is like a message of everyone is flawed in some way.
Yes,
everyone has mistakes or regrets in their past at some point.
Yeah, which is the perfect, you know, other side of the coin to the samurai, who are very honor based and they've never done anything wrong. But even that, there's one point where Shimura even admits he knows some shady characters, which I really liked. So
yeah.
I also on that same note of kind of delving into the origin stuff, you know, it as you progress into Act 2 and you get closer to Act 3, Jin's demeanor changes. He's very much, you know, I'm going to do anything to kill the Khan and the Mongol invaders, whereas he wasn't so brazen at the start. And that's why I think Yoriko's tale hit at a good time for me. That was the story of when he made it back to his homestand before it's connected to him getting the Sakai armor.
The poison dart lady.
Yeah, the poison dart lady. Yeah.
yeah, I remember her very well.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought that hit at such a perfect time because like he's delving into more darkness. He's really embracing the ghost. And this was a nice, like, almost palate cleanser of being like, hey, like, remember who you were, remember like where you came from. And I just thought it was a really sweet, but in the same way that we've talked about, very somber tale too, because she's very much, you know, she's losing her cognitive thought. She's mistaking him for his father, but it gave a really
well, and also getting the secret of what happened with her and her father.
Yeah.
And his father, right?
Yeah.
I love those. I agree with you, Alex. I mean, I think the allies in this game really make the game. Not that the main story's bad, but they so drive home what works in the narrative going on here, right? Mm-hmm. Because every one of them, like we talked about, is so deeply flawed and yet trying to do what they think is right and trying to, like, you know, marshal forward. And I love, you know, like, man, there's some real good voice actors in there. I mean, I was playing with the English voice actors, so I can't speak to the Japanese, but like, there's a lot of pathos and emotion in this story. I mean, and they do not pull punches, right? I mean, there's some of these moments where you're talking about, like, that the poor woman and her children and her grandchildren are all dead, and you know, she's just screaming in anguish. And I think there are other games that would pull back from that, right? That literally would not make light of it, but just sort of like the narrative equivalent of cutting to black. And they don't do that here.
No.
Right? Like, in every sense, with each of the allies and with the main characters, you're forced to stare their grief in the face and their sorrow, and they're upset about their own decisions in the past. And it's a very unusual kind of tone for a video game to set. Like, I can't honestly, I can't think of another game that does that same kind of unrelenting focus on grief and loss and all that sort of stuff in the same way.
Yeah, and that's why that fight with Moscow was so great. It was like, oh, she is so blinded by her rage that she's willing to take me out, someone who's been her ally the entire time, who has seen me in diapers. Like, she's gonna take me out. And when that moment happened, I was like, oh, like, it's on, but also like, I don't want to kill her. Like, but I was like, oh, this is so good. The duels were so good.
And that was like quest, I think it was like 8 of 9 of Moscow's stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was preemptively impressed and then a little disappointed that they didn't do that. I thought that they were going to make me kill her.
I did too.
And then the final Moscow quest was going to be me like getting vengeance for her because she was so like, well,
So
anyway,
lost. Yeah.
that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But structurally, I mean, I agree with you, Miller, about the tone on that. But like structurally, another thing I really like about those ally missions is that even though it's a different game genre, it really taps into what I love about like Mass Effect and loyalty missions, right?
Mhm.
Like that's effectively what they are, even though these allies aren't party members in the same way that they are in an RPG. They still occupy the same role. They're with you in these major moments, and I think being able to sort of slowly delve into these side stories with them is really rewarding in the same way.
Mhm.
It's a really good
for
call.
me.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
It's a really, really good call.
Yeah. So that's that was probably my I don't know, like what was your favorite one of those side quests?
It's hard to say the favorite for me because like I loved the one where all of her children died, you know, like
Yeah.
I mean I think there are ones that really stuck with me and have stuck with me in the week since I finished playing. Uh Lady, what is it, Adachi, is that her
Yeah,
name?
Moscow Adachi.
Masiko's I think was particularly painful and striking. Just I mean, like even the animation work and the artwork on her face to reflect this woman who has like lived a life of privilege in many regards, but has just been completely put through the ringer in recent months, and just the sadness that just pours off of her and anguish and stuff, I thought was pretty great. And I think you should
get that anguish. That anguish was pretty great.
It's great. I mean, it's great from a like narrative depth and engagement perspective. Ishikawa, I think, was also really good. His voice actor was awesome.
He was
And
fantastic.
they did some really smart writing with him to make him kind of just like, he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah,
Right?
He's this old grump that you don't necessarily like or trust, but at the same time, it's like he doesn't wrong you
No.
explicitly.
No.
You know, I love how as soon as you meet that character, the game just acknowledges that you know that this is Tomoe. They give her a different name, but it's like, yeah, you know, and we know who this is. And Jin probably knows also. And I like how they don't turn that into a big deal. Not some like Tomoe kind of moment.
Yeah.
Like
and
they don't take the anime approach.
Yeah. Well, no, it's like I just really liked how they handled that in the moment where you know they're sitting around that fire or whatever, and he's just like, yeah, I agree. Tomoe.
Yeah. It was so good.
Okay. We all knew that.
Yeah.
So I like the way that it implies that he's even known all along, just like you as a player did, but he's still sort of willing to see her motivation and like what's going on there.
I definitely took a sword swing or two at her though when she first introduced. I was like, I know who this is.
I think that I love that quest too. I think that quest has one of the best spoken lines of the whole game, which is, you know, the thing that ends it, which is that like this woman who, you know, by mutual acknowledgement they understand each other's honor and they do kind of like each other a little bit in a way. Mm-hmm. And she says to him like, you know, Jin, you can stay the night. And he's like, no, I can't. And like, I love that moment. It's so great of like, again, speaking to the sort of subtlety with which they have presented the main character up to that point. It's not a choice like, no, I'm not interested in you or anything like that. It's literally, no, he can't. Like, that is not who he is. And he won't do that. Even if he hungers for companionship, even if he knows that nobody will ever know, he'll know, and he won't do it. And I just thought it was great.
So that actually leads into something else I wanted to talk to you guys about a little bit, which is the game's approach to that idea of like good and evil, or you know, like things a character will do, won't do. could do, shouldn't do blank.
Right.
In the sense that, like, I remember when I started this game, Miller, I sent you a sort of frantic text a couple hours in because I had I'd snuck up and killed someone in a story mission.
Yeah.
And it gave me a flashback to basically Lord Shimura like scolding Jin for doing something dishonorable.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, is this one of those games that's gonna like keep track of how many people I kill and is gonna give me some like bad ending, or like
Right.
if effectively like does this game track my morality or not? I personally liked that it didn't, but like what did you guys think it was going for there? Did that work for you?
See, that's actually something I would have liked to see them delve into more. Not necessarily in this game. Whatever comes next, I'd like to see them, because it seemed like they had a very concrete vision for the story they wanted to tell here. So I don't want them to branch that off. But I would be curious to see what a game would be like, especially in Ghost 2, that emphasizes two very different takes on morality and more the morals of combat. I'd love to see that kind of, because it changes the story a little bit as in the enemies get like scared of you and stuff like that. But I would have liked to see more narrative changes because of that in whatever comes next. Because like I said, there was this, and especially talking to Nate Fox, they had a specific vision for this game, and adding those different systems I think would have lessened the experience if they didn't nail it, which they could have. But that's something I feel like that's Sucker Punch just really wasn't setting out to accomplish this time. So
yeah. What about you, Miller?
Yeah, I am pleased that they didn't try to do like a morality system, and I'm also was pleased that they did it the way that they did with those. I mean, it does give you a certain level of disquiet when you have they don't overdo it. You don't have like every time you murder somebody from behind that you get some flashback, but you do. It does happen like at least 2 or 3 times over the course of the game that he's forced to recall what he's giving up, right? Because that's what it is, right? Like for him, Jin is giving up his identity to save his people, right? This isn't like, oh, I love murdering people from behind and stabbing them. I mean, he kind of hates it. And it goes against everything that he's been taught and everything that he wants to be able to be. And like to that point, he also wants to be able to be a good son to Lord Shimura and to take on that role and to be his heir and to be the samurai he was sort of born to be. And it is in some ways the great tragedy of the narrative, beyond any of the other sort of side stories. For our main protagonist, the real tragedy is that he can't be the person that he wants to be because his understanding of being a samurai is service to the people. And the way that he sees a path to service, to saving them, to bringing them to some level of like freedom from this threat, the only route that he sees is one that he has to give up himself. And so I love the way that they, when they take you down that path, you are forced to, you see those flashbacks, and that's the time that they choose, that the game makers have chosen to push that forward to you, to force you as the player to also inhabit that idea a little bit, and to make you be like you said, Joe, it made you a little bit like disquieted,
yeah,
right, and kind of uncomfortable. Like, oh, I don't want to screw this up. Like, I want to be the good samurai, but I guess I got to do it, right? And they don't really give you a choice because Jin, in his mind, didn't really have a choice either.
Yeah, and not to call Alex a total idiot, but completely agree with you. And Alex is a total idiot for wanting because like really, I think what it boils down to for me is that like games for so long have explored that kind of binary good or evil thing, right? Like you way back to like KOTOR or something. That effectively, I think that those explorations of choice are less interesting because most players make that choice right away. When you start up Knights of the Old Republic and you're like, from the first hour, you're like, I'm going to be the good Jedi or I'm going to be the evil Sith. And all your choices just sort of flow downstream from that. So you're not really making choices as you play the game. What I think is so interesting about Ghost of Tsushima's approach to it is it does let you explore that sense of like noble and ignoble actions, but without making them a choice. So you're just sort of experiencing them naturally as the story goes on. It's a different way to look at action and consequence without necessarily putting the ball in the player's court and making them, feel good or bad for the stuff that they're doing.
For sure. And I think, to defend my idiocy, I think the way they set it up, though, I do think the way they set that story up, like you said, is conducive for something a little bit more exploration. I don't want, in Ghost 2, if that's coming, I don't want a bar that like is like in Red Dead, but like to me, like maybe it's just years of playing Assassin's Creed, but like I understand that to these characters, the stealth sections are dishonorable. But like now that we've established that like Jin has saved thousands of people because of it, like I don't think it would be a binary good or bad. It's just how you choose to affect the world and the world's response to it. I think could be an interesting play in the sequel. So if there's one.
So. Well, okay. So before we get on to possible sequel, I think I think we'll probably close out with that. But the thing I want to touch on before we get there is character death. Because this is a game that had some major deaths in it. Which one hit you the hardest?
Definitely my horse, Sora. That was
Sora.
Brutal. I did Sora.
Matt,
I had
Miller
to do
and
it.
I both had Nobu.
Yeah, we had Nobu. Good old Nobu. Poor guy.
I've bemoaned the third one, but I'm Kingdom Hearts fan. I loved it, and I saw Sora, and I was like, come on, I gotta do it. And someone in the comments will back me up on that, as I know you're not a big Kingdom Hearts guy, but
and that had to make it all the worse, right? That it's your fault that Sora died.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God. And the fact that his grave is just sitting on the side of a road, just casually
loyal
there.
Friend grave.
I was like,
it's just a spot on your map you can go visit.
Yeah.
And okay, so like the game was so clearly, because I agree, the horse one more than Lord Shimura, more than Taka. The horse was the one that just like that tore me apart. And from the first act, it was so clear to me, like, wow, they are just doing a great job of making me love this horse. Like as I'm playing them, like we sort of think about possible articles that we could write about games that we like, about things, that we're doing. And one of the first ideas that I had as I was playing is like, why I love this stupid horse in Ghost of Tsushima. And like the cool thing Sucker Punch does to make you love this horse. And then as we move into Act 3, it became clear that would not be a good article to write. But I was thinking about it so much by just Jin's reactions to the horse, right? Like just things like I wouldn't trade anything for you. You're a good horse, Nobu. And you're like, oh, when this is all over, we'll just take a relaxing
so
ride.
good.
Nice
Yeah.
ride.
It's like
taking naps together was my favorite.
Yeah, I thought the taking naps one was great. Like all those little end mission things that like amidst all of the loneliness that this lonely path that he's walking, he's got one guy that's always by his side, and it's his horse. And then they take the horse away. It's rough.
Which, because they went to such lengths to make you love that horse, or to display Jin's love of that horse, I am normally super spoiler averse. Like I don't want to know if there's a game I'm going to play, and I know I'm going to play it. I don't want to know anything about it. But this was an exception where I sent Matt a message that was like, look, Matt, I need to emotionally prepare if this game is going to kill my horse. So I know how I normally feel about spoilers, but I need you to tell me, does my horse die? And Matt's response was something like, well, there is a waypoint marker later in the game called Loyal Friend's Grave. And I was just, but I'm glad I knew, because then that I took a lot of pictures before I went into the act, before I went into Act 3. I went and did a tour with a bunch of pictures of me sleeping on my horse and looking out over vistas and doing cool stuff.
Did you feed him his favorite meal too, and the whole thing, whole 9 yards with that? Yeah.
I mean, if it would have let me feed him, deliberately feed him apples, I would have filled him so full of apples. But yeah, Anyway,
they handle that really well, and they I think it's a smart way for them to handle that transition into the hit rock bottom moment for the hero, right? Because they give you so much. You're it's the one thing you're forced to engage with, right? Like one of the allies, you could have a player who's like, I don't care about Ishikawa, right? And
yeah, that's a
so
good point.
there's no way to ensure that that's a moment of driving home the loss themes. But you always have your horse, right? You're always relying on your horse to get you where you need to go fast. He's always there at the end of every mission, you know, waking you up and telling you we got to get going, and like you're always talking to him as you're driving around, and so you're it's the way that the game uh forces you into that dark place that Jin gets to when he's like wandering through the wasteland by himself, and he's injured and he's lost his only friend. Um, and then
Yeah.
the rest of the game then is the climb out to one final moment of
Yeah.
redemption and success.
And I think
And I
oops, sorry,
oh,
Joe.
go ahead, Alex.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna quick say, like, even from a mechanic standpoint too, like there's some like, we've all played Skyrim at point, like The Witcher 3 Roach is kind of annoying. And this horse, the mechanics were so good and he was so smooth to ride on, where I think that endeared him to me even more, which is weird to say, but like sometimes Roach, it was like, what are you doing? Like, get over here. Like, come on.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to spoil anything for any other games that may have come out in, the last several years. But what is it about horses that make them fair game? It seems like something about like it seems like developers and storytellers have fewer compulsions about killing off horses than maybe some other. It's like I don't know if anyone would be so cavalier about killing off like if Jin had a dog instead of a horse, right? I don't know.
I think devs know that we as a society value animals more than people at this point. So
Well, I would add an addendum to that. I don't think it's so much that devs know that we value people versus animals differently in that way. It's more that in the world of video games, we murder a lot of people. Like that's just the nature of conflict in games. It's a whole other subject, but like it is sort of fundamental to most action games and shooting games and things like that you're gonna have to be okay with taking out other sentient two-legged things who talk. And it often, I think, going into the world of like dealing with animals and their loss, that's a place that I don't think any of us are as used to seeing that in games, and so it's maybe more striking, and has a bigger emotional hit in a lot of instances.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's also something about like the bond between a human and an animal, I think, is a simple thing and maybe easier from a storytelling standpoint to portray authentically and
Yeah.
have people connect with versus the complicated relationships that humans have with each other and the demand of that on writing to make that believable. And but
yeah,
yeah, I
and
think
and going off your point too, like all joking aside, like there's a purity to that relationship. Like, that once you have a dog's loyalty, it is very hard to break that. Like, and I think that's why when you see that death of innocence, it's really hard to stomach.
I wonder, in answer to your specific question, Joe, about like another animal like a dog or a cat versus like it feeling like it's fair game for a horse. I think that's an interesting question. Like why is that why do we go there specifically, and why is it often a horse that we use to make that point or whatever?
yeah.
I wonder if it isn't actually like getting into the psychology of like what this thing does for you in the game, right? That like there's simultaneously the affection of human and animal that's being presented there, but there's also utility, right? And as a
Yeah.
game player, you come to value certain utilities in the same way that you would. I like that this game has a fast travel system. or I like that there's a good waypoint marker, right?
At the end of
And-
Act 2, your fast travel system is murdered.
Yeah, no, I'm serious, right? Like I'm not saying that that's like a conscious thing.
Right, right.
I wonder if there isn't an element of it that, like, what is a thing that we can do to the player to force them to have to like recognize that something bad happened, right? And even independent of any emotion that you connect to it, if you lose your horse, you lost your ride, man. Like you can't go as fast, right? And
True.
like just like game players to some degree do fall back on like those utility things when they think about the games that they're playing, and like what make a thing that makes my life more convenient is really important to me, right? And so if you want to really hit the player where it hurts, you take away that convenience. But then, of course, you stack on what you hope for, which is what they've done well here, which is you also build an emotional connection to that mechanic.
Yeah.
And then when it's taken away, you feel like you're hit both with the emotional weight of it and the loss of, like, because you do feel that in Ghost of Tsushima, and those minutes afterwards before you get that next horse, who's kind of like stringy and thin, and you don't really.
Oh yeah, your next horse sucks.
Right.
Just a dumb brown horse.
Yeah. So you just get, and then of course, and near the end of the game, you actually get back a good horse or whatever. But but during those minutes, you're forced to reckon with, like, gosh, I guess I gotta walk. I gotta walk where I'm going. This sucks. And I don't know, it works.
Yeah. So as we wrap up the discussion here, I think that we've hit a lot of we've hit the major spoiler points, I think, final bosses and ally quests and all that. So if we look ahead to the future, who knows what a Ghost of Tsushima 2, like story-wise, you can't liberate the island again, but who knows what that looks like. But if it happens, what I want to know from you guys is, like, what is number one, top of your list, thing you would like to see out of a sequel?
That's a good question. I it seems like they're building it towards a showdown with the Shogun, which could be kind of cool. They talk about that, especially at the end, they talk about going to the mainland, they talk about Kyoto. Being on mainland Japan would present some really interesting story beats that I would be interested in. And I want to see. Okay, not gonna get. There's another game I was gonna mention, but that would be spoilers. But I'm curious to see how they handle the decision at the end with Shimura. If they honor that choice, depending on how you make it, or if they just say one is canonical, one is not. But I would love to see them kind of weave that story around, and I would love to see a showdown with the Shogun as the Mongols are, pushing into Japan. I do not know the history of this at all. I just want to be perfectly clear on that. But from like a thematic standpoint, I think that could be really cool, because they kind of, especially
you sure want like Jin and the show, like you want those characters back.
Up until as I was going through it, I was like, maybe a story, because I didn't know if Jin was going to live or die at the end of this. I was like, it could be cool to see a story of Shimura's upbringing and see if he dealt with choices that he just didn't tell Jin about, because they kind of alluded to it at one point where he's like, I know my fair share of shady people too. So up until that point, I was like, this could be interesting, especially if the Shogun still hates Jin, still is like, you have tarnished our reputation, you have ruined our control, like, you are enemy number one, on top of the Mongol storyline too. Because I don't know who you, because I thought Khotan Khan was a really great villain and someone I actually would have liked to see more of. But I just kind of, especially in the ending where you spare Shimura, it's almost like the ending of Dark Knight, where like Shimura is like, they'll hunt you, and then he's like, well, it was like Batman going like, no, you'll hunt me, you'll send the dogs after me, and it's like, it was like he was okay with that. He was okay with the fact that he's the ghost, he has a certain reputation now, and it's like, I did what I did for my people, like, come at me now, I am the Dark Knight. He it's kind of a superhero origin story, because at the end of it, he's got the cape flying, he's got the new outfit.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that's why for me the number one thing on my list is a reboot.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
I think Jin's story is done. I think feudal Japan lasts centuries. There is a lot of other like fertile ground there to tap into, and I think that way you avoid the sort of Metroid problem of, okay, so why is Jin terrible now?
That's a good point. Yeah.
If you return to Jin, what I want is old man Jin, like ancient, like samurai master.
Yeah.
I don't want. I want his story to be. I want the sunset period of Jin Sakai rather than the sunrise.
Yeah. Keeping it on the Batman, like it could be Batman Beyond, where he is like the heir or the tutor to his son, who is taking up the mantle of the Ghost.
Yeah. Okay. Not everything's Batman here. Alex.
All right.
I mean, there's a couple things I bring up. One is that historically there is a second invasion. This is, I believe, is set in 1274, and there's a second Mongol attempt at invasion that passes through Tsushima in 1281, I think. And so they do have a way to maintain the same protagonist if they want it to, or sort of the same time frame. The challenge there is I don't think you want to just have the same landmass again, right? And so I would think that the way to do it, I guess I don't love the idea of like Jin or anybody else having to go to war with his own people, right? To your point of like having to fight the shogun and stuff. I think that the shogun and the samurai caste is going to always at this point hate Jin and be hunting for him. But I don't know that to use your Batman metaphor, it would feel like that's Batman then turning on the police of Gotham, which he just wouldn't ever do, right? Even though they try to hunt him down.
Yeah.
I think instead, what I would be excited to have happen would be a trip, there's another invasion coming, and we need to hobble it before it starts. And so Jin, whether it's Jin or it's another protagonist, like for instance, I think you could certainly make a case for Tomoe being a pretty great choice for a second protagonist.
Yeah.
That you have a character who goes to mainland China, not the mainland of Japan, but crosses over onto mainland of Asia and tries to prevent the worst possible result of that inevitable invasion,
like a behind enemy line sabotage sort
exactly.
of thing. Yeah,
that'd be great too.
And so that allows for a lot of things. It allows both for a new landmass that you're exploring, that would be exciting. It changes the dynamic a little bit, which I think is important in a sequel. Instead of it being all about defense, it becomes, at least initially, about the main character taking on an offensive role, only to discover that the Mongols, historically, the Mongols did this across wide swaths of Asia in that period. So he would have to come to terms with, coming to this place that he thinks he's going to attack the Chinese mainland, and then realizing that in some ways, many of those people are just as enslaved as the people of Tsushima were going to be. And so he's got to develop the compassion to deal with that. I think there's a lot of opportunities there for them to do cool things and still, follow through with the characters that they've introduced and with the conflict they've introduced, and historically have it match up with the idea that this isn't it for the Mongols. They keep trying. And it's one of the things that's most fascinating about this moment in history is that they didn't succeed. That the tremendous weight of the Mongol army just washed across the world, but it stopped before it could overtake Japan. And that's the germ of a really exciting narrative and part of what works about this first game. And I think they could carry it through to the next one.
Do you guys think there will be a sequel? I mean, yeah.
So,
really well already.
I think 2.4 million units or something. Yeah.
Exactly. This game sold 2.4 million units in 3 days, which made it if I'm remembering all the qualifiers correctly, it is the fastest selling first party new IP debut on the PS4. So, yeah, I think no matter how you look at it, this game has been a huge success for Sucker Punch. Like from like critically, it's been a big success. Commercially, I played it and loved it. I know you guys clearly enjoyed it also.
Very, very much so.
And I know that there are lots of people out there. I'm still sort of plugged in, on social media and stuff. Just I'm enjoying seeing all the responses, all the great photo mode pictures people are taking, and everything like that. So I think that there's definitely momentum behind this that Sony and Sucker Punch would probably be eager to keep going. But
it'll look pretty on PS5.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. Until we learn
new franchise.
Until we learn anything new about those plans, I think that's spoiled. We talked about it.
Yeah, we
spoiled it, man.
Oh, we did it, baby. Yeah,
that's the big stuff we can hit on. So thank you, Alex and Matt, for sitting in with us here. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in and for supporting us. And we'll see you next time. Bye.